Markdown: Why Do Fools Rise to Power? Secrets of Leadership from Machiavelli to Modern Times. Have you ever wondered how a leader with seemingly dubious talents or limited competency can rise through the ranks of power? History is filled with such examples, from emperors and tyrants of ancient times to modern politicians and corporate CEOs. This video delves into this paradox using the penetrating insights of Niccolò Machiavelli, whose almost 500-year-old treatise, The Prince, remains a cornerstone for understanding the mechanisms of power. By comparing historical occurrences with modern events, examining the psychology behind our choices, and reviewing the structures that allow ineptitude to flourish, we can shed light on why, time and time again, seeming fools seem destined to lead. Machiavelli's enduring insights on power and leadership. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote during the tumultuous political climate of Renaissance Italy, a time of shifting alliances, intrigue, and repeated power struggles. Far from being an idealist, Machiavelli sought to understand power in its raw, unvarnished reality. His insights reveal several key ideas: the balance of fear and love. Machiavelli famously stated that while it is ideal for a ruler to be both loved and feared, if one must choose, it is safer to be feared than loved. In practice, however, a balance is required to avoid hatred among the ruled. Fear compels obedience, but excessive cruelty may breed rebellion. Historical instances attest to this principle. Emperors such as Caligula and Nero ruled through terror, yet their regimes ultimately crumbled under the weight of public resentment and internal dissension. In contrast, leaders like Franklin D. Roosevelt demonstrated that carefully moderated authority, one that combined decisive leadership with empathy, can guide a nation through crises such as the Great Depression. Fortuna and virtue, luck versus skill. A central concept in Machiavellian doctrine is the interplay between fortuna, the ever-present force of chance or luck, and virtue, a ruler's ability to shape circumstances through skill, strategy, and adaptability. According to Machiavelli, even the most talented leaders must contend with the whims of fortune. The adaptation to unforeseen events, however, is what distinguishes successful rulers. Angela Merkel's steady handling of the European debt crisis, for example, illustrates how modern leaders must be nimble enough to counteract shifting global dynamics. Conversely, leaders who lack this adaptability, such as Nicholas II of Russia, have been swept away by the tide of history despite their inherited rights. Perception versus reality. Another of Machiavelli's seminal observations is the difference between appearance and reality. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, he wrote. Leaders who master the art of projecting confidence and competence, even if the substance of their leadership is lacking, often attract followings and consolidate power. This adage explains why figures as varied as Adam Newman of WeWork and even certain modern political figures can secure support and resources despite glaring operational flaws. The uses of deception and manipulation. In The Prince, Machiavelli contends that rulers must sometimes engage in deception in order to secure their rule. This pragmatic, or some would say cynical view holds that if actions must be taken for the sake of the state, conventional morality may need to be suspended. Consequently, strategies involving misinformation, calculated duplicity, and the manipulation of public sentiment are not aberrations, but rather necessary instruments of statecraft. Viewed today in the light of media manipulation and political misinformation, Machiavelli's ideas raise difficult questions about the ethical lines between effective leadership and treacherous behavior. Historical patterns of fools in rulership history is rich with examples where leaders who appeared ill-equipped or even downright foolish ascended to power and orchestrated dramatic events. Here are several illustrative cases. The tragic fates of monarchs and emperors. First example is when Louis VI of France ascended the throne through hereditary succession despite his lack of political acumen. His inability to grasp or address France's burgeoning fiscal crisis contributed directly to the outbreak of the French Revolution. The ensuing turmoil ended in his execution, a stark reminder of how incompetence mixed with rigid tradition can precipitate a regime's downfall. Second example is Nicholas II of Russia, the last czar who similarly clung to outdated autocratic methods in the face of an evolving political landscape. His failure to delegate power or to accept necessary reforms led directly to the Russian Revolution of 1917, plunging a once mighty empire into chaos. Also, Emperor Commodus of Rome offers another cautionary tale. Appointed to lead an empire renowned for administrative sophistication, Commodus chose instead to surround himself with flatterers and sycophants over capable administrators. His mismanagement hastened the decline of the Roman Empire, eventually giving way to a series of short-lived rulers and internal strife. Renaissance intrigue and the Machiavellian archetype Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, epitomized Machiavellian ambition. Known for his strategic ruthlessness, Borgia employed manipulation, calculated violence, and strategic alliances to consolidate territory in Renaissance Italy. Machiavelli himself saw in Borgia a model of virtue, of a man who could bend fortune to his will through a precise application of power. Even though Borgia's triumphs in his day were short-lived, his legacy lives on as a timeless example of leadership driven not by conventional merit, but by sheer ruthlessness and a fearless embrace of dangerous tactics. The tyrants and dictators of the modern era of modern history has witnessed leaders who, in many ways, embody the Machiavellian paradox. Adolf Hitler's rise in Germany is a prime example. Despite or because of his charismatic proclamations and the systematic use of propaganda, Hitler managed to subjugate an entire nation. By exploiting economic despair, nationalistic fervor, and deep-seated prejudices, his regime turned public perception into a tool for absolute control, even as it steered society into unprecedented catastrophe. Joseph Stalin extended this logic further by restructuring an entire nation according to his whims. Stalin's rule, marked by brutal purges and a relentless intolerance for dissent, underscores how an over-reliance on fear, coupled with the consolidation of power into a single authority, can devastate a country's human and social fabric. Let's look at the modern manifestations of incompetence in leadership. As much as the lessons of history resonate, they are not confined to the past. The mechanisms by which power is acquired and maintained have only grown more sophisticated and sometimes more insidious with modern technology and the evolution of political systems. Mark down the populist surge in the power of overconfidence. The concept of cognitive bias, particularly the Dunning-Kruger effect, helps explain why certain modern leaders emerge with overconfidence. Studies in psychology reveal that individuals with limited knowledge often overestimate their capabilities, while true experts tend to be more circumspect about their limits. This imbalance of self-perception has real-world consequences in leadership scenarios where confidence, however misplaced, can project an illusion of competence. In recent decades, leaders who display sweeping, simplistic solutions to complex problems have captivated electorates. For instance, Donald Trump's electoral victory can be partially attributed to his ability to harness populist sentiments, projecting certainty in the face of complex national challenges. His rhetorical style, marked by impervious boldness and an unyielding projection of self-assurance, has been likened to the qualities celebrated by Machiavelli and successful rulers, even if those qualities often mask deeper deficiencies in policy and governance. Case studies of leadership in the modern era. Donald Trump and the populism phenomenon. Donald Trump's rise was fueled by a potent mix of media savvy and an appeal to an electorate tired of conventional politics. His frequent, unmoderated social media presence allowed him to bypass traditional gatekeeping channels, fostering a direct connection with his supporters. This method of communication, which often prioritized bold proclamations over nuanced discussion, mirrors the Machiavellian emphasis on the appearance of decisiveness. In Trump's case, overconfidence blended with manipulated public sentiment to generate a power base that was both devoted and uncritical, characteristics that have been observed repeatedly in political uprisings throughout history. Boris Johnson and the Brexit conundrum. Boris Johnson's tenure as the United Kingdom's Prime Minister provides another portrait of leadership where personal charisma and opportunistic rhetoric trump traditional competence. Johnson's handling of Brexit negotiations and his response to the COVID-19 pandemic were marred by inconsistent policy shifts and unpredictable public messaging. Yet, his robust public persona and tendency to deflect accountability allowed him to maintain political support even as the country faced monumental challenges. His style, marked by a cavalier disregard for the complexities of governance, aligns uncannily with Machiavelli's observation that the perception of strong leadership, regardless of underlying competence, can be a decisive factor in winning popular support. Global examples: Vladimir Putin, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Xi Jinping. In a broader international context, the leadership of figures such as Vladimir Putin of Russia, Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, and Xi Jinping of China illustrates how contemporary political systems frequently reward those who excel in manipulating public perception rather than in delivering consistent, transparent policies. Putin's reign has involved manipulating state-controlled media, suppressing dissent, and exploiting nationalism to build an enduring cult of personality. Erdogan's administration in Turkey has been marked by strategies, including the repression of political opposition, reconfiguring institutional checks, and capitalizing on nationalist sentiments. While Xi Jinping's consolidation of power is evidenced by rigorous anti-corruption campaigns that have simultaneously removed rivals and solidified his dominance within the ruling Communist Party. Each of these leaders demonstrates how modern politics can emulate the Machiavellian reliance on shaping perception over substantive policy achievements, media, technology, and the amplification of simplicity. The digital age has transformed the way leaders project their image and control the narrative of public discourse. Social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube have democratized information dissemination, but they have also allowed for the short-circuiting of rational debate. The algorithms governing these platforms are engineered to favor content that elicits strong emotional responses, often at the expense of detailed or complex analysis. This environment is fertile ground for leaders who are adept at producing simple, definitive messages that resonate with deeply felt fears and hopes. Consequently, even leaders whose grasp of policy details is tenuous can maintain power by exploiting the immediacy and virality of digital communication. The relentless pace of the digital era means that misinformation or oversimplifications can spread far more rapidly than well-reasoned, nuanced arguments. As Machiavelli would have observed, the ability to control perceptions has become more critical than ever, transforming the way we evaluate our leaders. Political and corporate scandals are now played out on platforms where sensationalism triumphs over sober discussion and where the line between entertainment and governance becomes blurred. The psychological underpinnings of leadership selection. Understanding why societies frequently elect leaders who lack demonstrable competence requires delving into cognitive psychology and behavioral economics. Two critical phenomena stand out in this context: the Dunning-Kruger effect and overconfidence. The Dunning-Kruger effect posits that individuals with limited capability often overestimate their competence. In leadership contexts, this cognitive bias can cause underqualified candidates to not only believe in their own abilities but also exude a misleading certainty that attracts support. In environments marked by complexity and uncertainty, voters are more likely to favor bold, decisive figures, even if those figures' proposals are shallow or oversimplified. This phenomenon is evident in both political elections and corporate boardroom decisions, where overconfidence can often be mistaken for strategic acumen. The need for cognitive closure. Humans have a deep-seated need for cognitive closure, a desire for definitive answers in an increasingly ambiguous world. This psychological trait makes individuals especially susceptible to leaders who promise simple solutions to complex problems. During times of crisis or rapid change, an electorate's craving for certainty can override skepticism and critical thought. Leaders who craft narratives that reduce multifaceted issues to binary choices or clear enemy versus victim dichotomies are effectively tapping into this desire for closure. Machiavelli was well aware that, in moments of uncertainty, the electorate is more inclined to seek out the appearance of strength and decisiveness, even if such appearances mask an underlying superficiality. The role of identity in group dynamics. Another important psychological factor is the way in which leaders manipulate group identity to mobilize support. By creating a clear demarcation between us and them, leaders can galvanize populist sentiment and distract from their own shortcomings. This tactic, which can be seen in many historical and modern regimes, reinforces group cohesion at the expense of nuanced debate. It shifts focus away from policy details and towards emotional allegiance, a strategy that not only consolidates power internally, but also stifles dissent. The tribal mentality fostered by identity politics has enabled many a Machiavellian leader to secure a loyal base while marginalizing any alternative viewpoints. The convergence of history and modernity. When viewed through the lens of historical experience, the rise of incompetent leadership is not an aberration, but a recurring theme. Comparisons between past and present reveal both enduring patterns and evolved methodologies. The enduring lessons of Machiavelli. Machiavelli's writings, though composed over 500 years ago, continue to resonate precisely because they address the timeless interplay between appearance and substance, between ambition and competence. His insights into the dynamics of fear, love, and perception remain as applicable in today's media-saturated environment as they were in the courts of Renaissance Italy. His insistence that leaders must sometimes forsake conventional morality to secure the state rings true in modern scenarios where ethical concessions are often made in the name of political expediency. Today as now, power continues to reside less in the hands of those who are necessarily the most competent and more frequently in those who can master the art of perception. Historical parallels. Historical case studies, from the autocratic missteps of Louis XVI and Nicholas II to the Machiavellian maneuvers of Cesare Borgia, offer clear parallels with modern phenomena. Just as Cesare Borgia was able to capitalize on the confusion of Renaissance Italy, modern leaders like Putin and Xi Jinping have exploited modern states' vulnerabilities through centralized control, manipulated media, and strategic purges of opposition. The patterns remain consistent. When institutions are weak or compromised, when the electorate remains more captivated by spectacle than substance, and when leaders themselves exploit cognitive biases, incompetence not only rises, but becomes deeply entrenched. Modern political landscapes may appear more complex than their historical counterparts, but the underlying dynamics remain strikingly similar. The polarization of contemporary politics, fueled by social media, and the simplification of policy debates into binary choices mirrors the divisive tactics of old. Leaders who promise simple answers to complex problems, whether by blaming external enemies, offering absolute certainty in uncertain times, or simply presenting themselves as unassailable figures, reflect an enduring strategy that has been employed time and again throughout history. Rather than heralding a new era of sophisticated leadership, the digital age has in many respects amplified the ancient principles laid out by Machiavelli. Can this cancer be eradicated? Having examined why incompetent and sometimes unethical leaders often rise to power, how can individuals and societies counteract these tendencies? The answer lies in developing robust personal and institutional defenses. Markdown. 1. Cultivating intellectual humility. Recognizing the limitations of one's own knowledge is the first step toward resisting the allure of overconfidence, both in oneself and in potential leaders. Intellectual humility involves a deep commitment to continuous learning and an acceptance that complexity often resists simple answers. Educational systems that foster critical thinking and encourage skepticism can help build a citizenry less susceptible to superficial leadership. By actively questioning guarantees of absolute certainty or simplistic explanations, more discerning constituents gradually diminish the power of leaders who rely solely on the projection of certainty. Fostering media literacy. In an era where information and misinformation can spread rapidly, being able to evaluate sources critically is vital. Media literacy goes beyond merely knowing how to use digital platforms. It involves understanding how narratives are constructed, recognizing biases, and demanding transparency from those in power. By developing a more discerning public, societies can create an environment where deceptive tactics are more easily exposed and challenged. Strengthening institutional checks and balances. The design of governmental and corporate institutions plays a significant role in curbing the unchecked rise of power. Mechanisms such as independent oversight boards, transparent fiscal policies, and judicial review are all essential in forming a bulwark against incompetence. Robust systems of accountability ensure that those in power are subject to constant evaluation and, when necessary, timely corrective measures. Decentralizing decision-making and cultivating cognitive diversity, where voices from varied backgrounds are given weight, can help offset the echo chambers that often allow incompetent leadership to persist unchecked. Encouraging civic engagement and public discourse. Finally, societies that encourage active citizen participation foster an environment where leadership is continuously scrutinized. Open forums for debate, protection of free speech, and an engaged civil society all act as counterbalances to the simplistic narratives that often accompany the rise of unethical or incompetent leaders. In essence, the more individuals involve themselves in understanding political processes and in holding their leaders accountable, the less likely it is that manipulative tactics anchored solely on perception will succeed. The complex interplay between perception, competence, and leadership reveals both unsettling and hopeful truths. Unsettling because history repeatedly shows that manipulation, overconfidence, and opportunism often pave the path to power. Hopeful because with increased awareness and deliberate design of institutions, there is potential to favor merit, transparency, and accountability over superficial bravado. Policy innovations and educational reform. Future policy solutions may lie in the intersection between technology, education, and institutional reform. For example, ensuring that public education curricula emphasize critical thinking, logic, and a deep understanding of historical power dynamics can empower the next generation to better discern substance from style. Simultaneously, public policies that promote transparency, strengthen anti-corruption measures, and incentivize long-term performance over short-term gains can transform the environments in which leadership is selected and maintained. Accepting lessons of Machiavelli with caution. It is important to recognize that while Machiavelli's insights remain compelling, they must be contextualized within a modern framework. His recommendations were designed for a very different societal structure, one in which loyalty was secured through personal patronage and statecraft depended on overt displays of power. Today's leadership, while still subject to the influence of perception and overconfidence, is also influenced by ethical considerations, global interdependence, and a far more connected information ecosystem. In adapting Machiavellian insights to current challenges, it is essential to preserve the lessons on the dangers of unchecked ambition and manipulation without endorsing a wholesale abandonment of moral responsibility. The rise and fall of autocratic rule. Consider the trajectory of Emperor Louis XVI, whose inherited authority and rigidity in the face of rapidly changing fiscal realities set the stage for revolution. His inability to adapt, combined with a disconnect from the realities of his subjects' suffering, mirrors in some respects modern leaders who cling to outdated dogma in the midst of societal transformation. The eventual fall of Louis XVI, precipitated as much by the erosion of institutional legitimacy as by his personal shortcomings, serves as a timeless lesson on the perils of leadership that is divorced from the demands of accountability and innovation. In contrast, compare this with the modern narrative of leadership during economic crises. Leaders who stubbornly adhere to short-term policies, ignoring structural reforms, often create conditions ripe for public backlash. When short-term performance metrics dominate institutional incentives, leaders may sacrifice long-term stability for immediate gratification, replicating historical patterns of decay and disintegration. Manipulation of media and perception. Historical regimes such as those led by Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin exemplified the systematic manipulation of public perception through centralized propaganda machines and a controlled narrative. These regimes were able to maintain power even when their internal policies were flawed or repressive. Today, while overt propaganda may be less state-controlled in democratic societies, the digital landscape has created new avenues for shaping public opinion. Populist movements that thrive on the oversimplification of complex issues echo the same techniques, crafting a narrative where the leader is the sole repository of solutions, while dissent is framed as betrayal. The digital age has both amplified such messages and increased the public's awareness of them, offering an opportunity for resistance through improved media literacy and open debate. Institutional design and its impact on leadership quality. The history of institutional evolution offers many examples of how centralization, combined with weak accountability, can produce a fertile environment for incompetence. In many European monarchies, unchecked royal power often led to administrative decay, which in turn spurred revolutions or reform movements. Modern organizations, be they governmental or corporate, face similar pressures when decision-making is concentrated in the hands of a few individuals. In both the past and present, institutions that incorporate decentralization, robust checks and balances, and diverse advisory inputs tend to select for leaders who deliver consistent long-term results. The enduring relevance of Machiavelli's observations in our modern era is both a cautionary tale and an opportunity. On one hand, the repeated emergence of leaders who rely on manipulation, overconfidence, and superficial charm rather than genuine competence is a stark reminder of our collective vulnerability. On the other hand, the insights provided by historical and psychological research offer a guide, a roadmap to build systems and cultivate a citizenry capable of recognizing, questioning, and ultimately transcending these patterns. In our rapidly changing world, marked by technological innovation, shifting economic paradigms, and unprecedented access to information, the fight for effective leadership becomes ever more critical. The lessons drawn from centuries of political thought and power dynamics not only illuminate the pitfalls of our past, but also suggest pathways to a future where leadership is aligned with the true interests of society. Whether in government, the corporate arena, or even in everyday community life, the principles that Machiavelli so ruthlessly detailed continue to resonate. Let's take a break. If at this point you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. This will help you get a notification when we upload interesting videos like this. Let's continue. Now, to truly foster a culture where competence, responsibility, and ethical leadership prevail, our focus must not solely be on the individual traits of our leaders, but on the broader ecosystem that elevates these individuals. By integrating thoughtful institutional design, honing our collective intellectual curiosity, and committing to lifelong learning and accountability, we can transform our societies. We can build a future where what appears on the surface aligns more closely with the substance, a future where the darkness that sometimes enables the rise of fools is replaced with the illuminating power of wisdom, integrity, and prudence. Throughout history, the rise of incompetent or manipulative leaders has often been enabled by a confluence of factors: the allure of bold, simplified narratives in the face of complexity, an inherent human desire for clear, decisive action, and institutional faults that allow unchallenged power. Niccolo Machiavelli's exploration of power, its acquisition, its maintenance, and its abuse, remains one of the most profound studies in human governance. His insights into fear versus love, fortuna versus virtue, and the importance of perception over hard facts continue to resonate in today's political and corporate landscapes. A final word on the enduring relevance of power. From the ancient streets of Renaissance Florence to the digital battlegrounds of modern media, the dynamics of power remain as intricate and consequential as ever. Machiavelli's work, although controversial, provides a stark reminder. Power must be understood as a multifaceted force, one that can corrupt, manipulate, and enthrall. To navigate the complexities of today's leadership landscape, we must be ever mindful of both the seductive simplicity of overconfidence and the structural imperatives that sometimes reward it. In examining these themes, we are left with a profound and enduring question: how might societies recalibrate their values to favor genuine expertise, ethical conduct, and long-term vision? The answer lies in an ongoing commitment to critical inquiry, institutional reform, and civic engagement, a commitment that subverts the easy allure of manipulated image and shallow promise. May this video not only educate, but also empower you to recognize the patterns of the past and the signals of the present. In doing so, we collectively undertake the task of creating a future where leadership is measured not by the spectacle of empty promises, but by the hard-earned merits of competence and integrity. The quest for better leadership, much like the quest for understanding in the realm of political philosophy, is an unending journey, one that calls for constant vigilance, informed debate, and the courage to challenge the status quo. Whether you are a student of history, a citizen of a modern democracy, or an emerging leader, the lessons contained within these pages serve as a reminder that true power is built on the foundation of wisdom and that the light of knowledge can illuminate even the darkest corridors of authority. The rise of fools to power might seem inevitable at times, but by understanding the interplay of human psychology, institutional design, and historical precedent, we hold the key to fostering a political culture that truly rewards competence. As you reflect on the complexities outlined in this video, remember that every era provides an opportunity to rewrite the narrative, a chance to design systems where leadership is not merely a product of appearance, but a celebration of genuine capabilities and ethical responsibility. In conclusion, the phenomenon of incompetent leaders gaining power time-tested by history and validated by modern research, remains one of the most perplexing and persistent challenges of political life. With a thorough understanding of Machiavellian principles, fortified by both historical perspective and modern analysis, we are better equipped to question the motives behind persuasive appearances and to advocate for systemic reforms that prioritize transparency and accountability over empty rhetoric. May these insights inspire ongoing reflection and action, paving the way for a future in which power is harnessed for the true betterment of society. And may the wisdom hidden in the past continue to guide us through the ever-evolving complexities of our present and future. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, kindly subscribe and share.